Hi, welcome to this new tutorial video for biology. This is for your textbook chapter 2.5 and it's titled Enzymes. Now, enzymes are a class of biological molecule that are manufactured by all cells, and cells either use them within the cell for various purposes or they secrete them to the outside, and it's actually used outside the cell. So they occur in both situations. In this video, I want to teach you about enzymes and what they do. Now here you can see this is a cell, and this cell is producing enzymes, and it's doing so for a number of reasons, and it's doing it so it can accomplish all the things that a cell normally does. Now, what are some of these things? Well, to simplify things, cells are growing, and that takes work, that takes chemical reactions, that takes energy. They're also repairing themselves, which is kind of the same as growing almost, but again, that takes energy and that takes certain chemical reactions to happen. Cells are also breaking down substances. Cells are really good at this. We call that digestion. And cells are also forming new substances. So we know that cells manufacture new substances for their own use. And those new substances are products of chemical reactions that involve enzymes. So let's talk more about enzymes. The main idea for the video here is that enzymes are catalysts for chemical reactions in all living things. And so that brings up the new vocabulary word of catalyst. So what is a catalyst? So the idea here with a catalyst is that not all chemical reactions will occur on their own, even when the right chemicals are present. So even when the right chemicals are present inside a cell and a chemical reaction needs to happen, that chemical reaction may not proceed spontaneously. It needs some help. It needs a catalyst. For example, hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, when you put those two things together, they can react in a very violent explosion because hydrogen is flammable, and you get some heat, and as it turns out, you also get a little H2O or water. But this chemical reaction doesn't happen spontaneously. That's a good thing because in the air, there's lots of hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. But you need a little bit of a catalyst in order to make that happen. You also need the hydrogen and oxygen to be present in the right concentrations in order for this to happen as well. But even if they were in the right concentrations in the air wouldn't spontaneously just explode all the time. And again, that's a good thing for us because we need that air to breathe and live in. But you give that chemical reaction a little bit of a catalyst. For example, if you hold a match to a balloon filled with oxygen and hydrogen and you give it a little bit of energy input, in this case the heat from the flame, then that's when you'll get your explosion. So the catalyst for this chemical reaction is a little bit of input of energy, and a little bit of heat energy is input. Now when that explosion happens, there's a lot more heat that's released, and as well as a little bit of water that's formed from this reaction. So you can see here this balloon has filled with hydrogen gas probably, and there's oxygen around it, and as the latex of the balloon melts and that energy reaches the hydrogen gas, it also contacts the oxygen in the air in this room where this photograph was taken, and you get that explosion that is the chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen gas, and you get the explosion and the heat and the water. But again, the catalyst was the match that had the flame that actually caused that chemical reaction to happen. So a catalyst is a substance that provides the necessary input to make a chemical reaction occur. So let's talk about this in the case of cells and biology and enzymes. So a common reason why catalysts are needed is because a chemical reaction requires energy, just like the hydrogen and the oxygen needed the energy input from the flame to actually cause that chemical reaction to happen. If we look at this diagram here, over on the left-hand side are the reactants of a chemical reaction. These are the things that you bring together, or a cell would bring together to react for a specific reason. And the kind of peach-colored graph line here represents the amount of energy that's needed to get this chemical reaction to happen. And the tall blue line is that total amount of energy that's required to put into the system to make that chemical reaction happen. And then if that energy is put into the system, that chemical reaction will happen, and then the overall energy of the reactants will kind of drop as those products are formed. And over here on the right-hand side of the graph, you have the energy level of the products at the end of that chemical reaction. But a catalyzed reaction actually requires less energy input, which is why catalysts are so important. So the dotted line represents the energy of the reactants and the products over the course of this chemical reaction when a catalyst is actually in place to make this chemical reaction happen a little bit easier. So again, catalysts help chemical reactions happen, and this whole process has to do with the amount of energy that's needed. The amount of energy needed for a chemical reaction is called the activation energy. So a better definition for an enzyme is that an enzyme is a catalyst that reduce the activation energy needed for that chemical reaction. So we've taken the general definition of a catalyst, something that helps a chemical reaction occur, and we've actually applied that to the biological molecules we know of as enzymes. Enzymes are catalysts that reduce the activation energy needed for a chemical reaction, and that's great. That means a cell can do more chemical reactions with less energy, and cells are all about saving energy, and enzymes help them do that. Here's an example. Amylase is the name of an enzyme that's present in human saliva. It helps break down starches into sugar. Sugar is the main energy source for most of your cells. Cells can't use starch, but we eat starch. So when you eat the starch, amylase enzyme starts the breakdown of that starch into something a little bit simpler, into simple sugar molecules. But you need the enzyme in order for that chemical reaction to happen, because starches aren't going to spontaneously break down into sugars, because that process takes energy, and the amylase enzyme reduces the activation energy for that chemical reaction to occur. So this the breakdown of starch in the mouth with the help of amylase happens many hundreds or thousands of times faster than it would if you just sat around and waited for a starch to just decompose into simple sugars all by itself. So let's take a look at how enzymes actually work. Now this is a picture of how enzymes work, and so this is kind of a cartoon version, but these pieces that you can see here in the diagram are meant to look like molecules roughly, and so you can kind of get the gist of how enzymes actually work. So to set the stage, you have the enzyme. That's this purple molecule here. It has an active site. It's a part on the molecule where the thing it's going to react with actually bind. So that's called the active site. That's where the action of the chemical reaction is actually occurring. And then you have substrates, one or more substrates, in this case this yellow substrate and this red substrate, and they fit together, as you can see here sort of later on in time. They come together and fit in that active site. They fit together and with the enzyme, and then when they fit together, the enzyme helps that chemical reaction happen. In this case, those two substrates are going to combine into something new. That's the chemical reaction. And that new thing is called a product. And the enzyme releases that product, and the cell, because it's using this enzyme, is going to use that product for whatever it's going to use it for. So again, here are the steps. Step 1 is that the substrates bind to the enzyme's active site. Step number 2 is that the enzyme changes shape because it's contacted the substrates. It's actually going to change shape. It's actually that changing in shape that helps reduce the activation energy, and it helps these two substrates chemically combine. And then step 3 is that that product is released from that enzyme so the cell can use it for whatever it needs to use that new chemical product for. So let's look at this sort of in an animation here. So again, here's my enzyme. I'm going to add the substrate. Substrate number 1 fits right in there. And here's substrate number 2. I can add that to the enzyme, and that fits right in there. And you can see the enzyme changing shape. You can see the two substrates chemically combining into something new, and then the product, the new chemical, is being released from the enzyme. This chemical reaction would not occur unless this enzyme was there to help bring those two substrates together and create that new chemical product. So let's watch this again. I'm going to take substrate number 1, put it in the enzyme. I will then take substrate number 2, and let that bind with the enzyme as well. The enzyme changes shape. The two substrates chemically combine into a new compound, and the enzyme has helped the cell create a new chemical compound that it's going to use for a specific reason. The next thing I want you to know about enzymes is that an enzyme's function is highly dependent on its structure, what it's made of, and what it looks like. An enzyme can be damaged or denatured by extremes in temperature and pH. So if a cell experiences an extreme in temperature, extreme cold or extreme high heat, or extremes in pH, a situation that's high acidity or high alkalinity, the actual structure of the enzyme molecule is going to change shape. And when it changes shape, it can no longer interact with its substrates, and it can no longer help those substrates react chemically. So it's very important that a cell maintain homeostasis so that it can maintain a stable temperature and a stable pH so that all of its enzymes work properly. The last main idea here about enzymes is that enzymes are proteins. Proteins, we know, are a larger class of molecules that include all kinds of things that can be both found as part of cells and things that cells make. And these are large molecules, and remember, they're made from amino acids that bond together. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see all these amino acids that are put together in a chain, and those chains sort of react with each other and form a three-dimensional shape, like you can see here in the middle of the slide. And that three-dimensional shape probably looks a little bit more like this purple thing that you can see here that we were using in our animations to help describe how enzymes work. So remember, enzymes are just proteins. So let's summarize our enzyme video here. The first thing we know are that enzymes are catalysts that lower the amount of energy needed for a chemical reaction to occur. And that's a good thing because a cell wants to save energy. With enzymes, cells can do more work with less energy, and that's a benefit to the cell. The next thing is that enzymes cause chemical reactions to happen many times faster than they would otherwise. Cells are very small and they need to adjust to changing environments or to changing situations very quickly. So they need to either make stuff or break down stuff or do certain chemical reactions very quickly, and enzymes help them do that. And the final thing, and maybe the most important here, is to realize that enzymes are just proteins, which is a class of molecules that we already know about, and proteins are made by the cell. So the cell manufactures all the enzymes that it needs in order to do all the chemical reactions that it needs to do during its lifetime. So there's your video all about enzymes, textbook chapter 2.5. I'll see you for the next tutorial video.